The note trembled in my hands like a leaf caught in a storm. For words. Just four simple words scrawled in shaky handwriting that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my life. Run for your safety. I sat frozen in my car outside Dr. Langford's clinic, staring at those words until they blurred. The afternoon sun beat down through the windshield, but I felt ice cold. My fingers traced the letters over and over, as if touching them might change what they said. As if I could somehow rearrange them into something that made sense. Something that didn't turn my whole upside down. Run from what? Run from who? The questions hammered against my skull, each one louder than the last. I'd come here for a simple checkup, nothing more. Just another appointment in a long string of appointments since I'd moved in with my son Gregory and his wife Nora 6 months ago. They'd insisted I needed proper medical care, said I was forgetting things, getting confused. Said they were worried about me living alone after Harold died. And I'd believed them. God help me, I'd believed every word. But now, sitting in this parking lot with Dr. Langford's warning burning a hole in my palm, I couldn't stop replaying the appointment in my mind. The way his eyes had darted to the door every few seconds. How his hand shook when he wrote his notes. The strange questions he'd asked about my meals, my medication, who prepared my food. And that moment, that terrible, pivotal moment, when he leaned forward and whispered, "Don't ignore this," as he slipped the paper beneath my appointment card. His face had been pale, almost gray, like a man carrying a secret too heavy for his shoulders. Would you trust a note like this? Would you believe it, or would you convince yourself it was some kind of mistake? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. I wanted it to be a mistake. Desperately. Because if it wasn't, if Dr. Langford was right about whatever danger he thought I was in, then that meant someone wanted to hurt me. Someone close enough to make a doctor risk his career to warn me. My hands started shaking harder. I stuffed the note deep into my purse, buried it under tissues and old receipts and the little things elderly women carry around. As if hiding it could make the warning disappear. As if I could pretend I'd never seen it. But I had seen it, and now I couldn't unsee it. The drive home felt like traveling through molasses. Every turn, every stoplight stretched into eternity. My mind kept circling back to the past 6 months, picking apart memories I'd accepted without question. The dizzy spells that came after dinner. The fog in my head that made simple conversations feel like wading through mud. The way Nora always brought me my medication with a glass of water and stood there watching until I swallowed every pill. "Just making sure you don't forget, Mom," she'd say with that perfect smile. "We want you healthy." Healthy. The word tasted bitter now. I pulled into the driveway and sat there for a long moment, staring at the house. It looked so normal. White porch swing swaying gently in the breeze. Roses blooming along the walkway. The big oak tree Harold and I had always admired when we drive past years ago, back when this was just a pretty house belonging to strangers. But it wasn't strangers anymore. It was my son's house. My family. The front door opened before I could gather the courage to move. Nora stood framed in the doorway, wearing a pale blue dress and an expression of concern so perfectly crafted it could have been painted on. "Margaret, there you are." I was starting to worry. She hurried down the steps, her heels clicking against the concrete. "How was your appointment? What did Dr. Langford say?" My throat went dry. "Oh, same as always. Blood pressure's a little high, but nothing serious." "That's wonderful." Her smile widened, but something flickered behind her eyes. Something I'd never noticed before, or maybe had refused to see. "Come inside. I made your favorite tea."
Tea.
She'd made tea. My stomach clenched. I thought about the note hidden in my purse, about Dr. Langford's trembling hands, about all those evenings I'd felt so drowsy after dinner I could barely make it up the stairs to bed. "That's sweet of you," I heard myself say. My voice sounded normal, steady. Amazing how well you can lie when fear sharpens every sense. I'd love some. Nora linked her arm through mine, guiding me toward the house like I was a child who might wander off. Her grip was gentle but firm. Inescapable. Gregory's working late again, so it's just us girls tonight, she said brightly. We can have a nice, quiet evening together. Quiet. Yes, it was always so quiet in this house. The kind of quiet that presses against your eardrums until you want to scream just to break it. We stepped into the cool, dim interior. The door closed behind us with a soft click that sounded like a lock sliding home. And there on the kitchen table, steam rising in delicate curls, sat 2 cups of tea. She'd already poured mine. The first time I walked into this house, I should have trusted my gut. But grief makes you desperate for belonging, and loneliness will convince you that any shelter is better than an empty one. Harold had been gone 3 months when Gregory called. I was sitting in our kitchen, my kitchen, back when I still had a home of my own, staring at the pills the doctor had prescribed for my heart. The bottle felt heavy in my hand, heavier than it should have been. Mom, you can't keep living alone, Gregory had said on the phone. His voice carried that tone children use when they've decided what's best for their parents. Nora and I have plenty of space. We want you here. We need you here.
Need.
That word did something to me. After Harold died, nobody needed me anymore. I was just Margaret, the widow on Maple Street, who everyone pitted at church. So I'd said yes. I'd packed up 40 years of memories into cardboard boxes and let strangers carry them away. I'd locked the door to the house where Harold proposed to me, where we'd raised Gregory, where every corner held some piece of us. And I'd driven to Charleston with my heart full of hope that maybe, just maybe, I could be part of a family again. The house looked like something from a magazine. 2 stories of perfect white siding, black shutters, a wraparound porch that caught the evening light just right. Nora had met me at the door wearing an apron and a smile that showed every tooth. "Welcome home, Mom," she'd said, kissing my cheek. Her perfume was sharp, chemical. It made my eyes water. "You must be exhausted from the trip." She wasn't wrong. I was exhausted. Bone-deep tired in a way that had nothing to do with the drive and everything to do with starting over at 71. Gregory had hugged me tight, and for a moment, just a moment, it felt right. Like maybe this could work. Like maybe I could belong here. But then Nora took my arm and led me inside, and something shifted. The air felt different. Colder. The house was beautiful, sure, but it was the kind of beautiful that doesn't invite you to touch anything. Everything had its place. Everything was controlled. "We've set up the guest room for you," Nora said, guiding me up the stairs. "It has its own bathroom, so you'll have plenty of privacy. We thought you'd be more comfortable that way." Privacy. At the time, I'd thought it was considerate. Now I wondered if it was isolation. The room was nice enough. Pale yellow walls, white furniture, a window that looked out over the backyard. But it didn't feel like mine. It felt like a hotel room. Temporary. Like I was just passing through. That first night, Nora brought dinner to my room on a tray. "You need to rest," she'd insisted when I tried to come downstairs. Doctor's orders. Except I hadn't seen a doctor yet. Wouldn't see Dr. Langford for another 2 weeks. I'd eaten the chicken and rice she'd prepared. It tasted fine, nothing special. But an hour later, I could barely keep my eyes open. Sleep pulled me under like a riptide, fast and unforgiving. The next morning, I woke up groggy, my mouth dry as cotton. Nora was already in my room, opening the curtains, setting down a glass of water and 3 pills on my nightstand. "Morning, Mom," she'd said cheerfully. "Time for your medication." I'd stared at the pills, confused. "I don't take 3 pills. Just the heart medication." "Oh, Gregory told me the doctor added these before you moved. For your blood pressure and your memory." Her smile never wavered. "You probably just forgot." There it was. That word. Forgot. It became her favorite weapon over the following months. Anytime I questioned something, Anytime something felt off, she'd use it. You're forgetting again, Mom. Don't you remember? We talked about this. The doctor said this might happen. And slowly, I started believing her. Started doubting my own mind. Started thinking, maybe I really was losing it. Have you ever been made to doubt your own reality?
Drop a comment if you know what that feels like.
The weeks blurred together. My days became a routine I didn't choose. Breakfast in my room. Pills with water. Lunch downstairs if I felt strong enough. Otherwise, another tray delivered to my door. Dinner at 6 sharp. More pills. Then that crushing, unavoidable exhaustion that turned my limbs to lead. Gregory was always working. Always had a meeting, a deadline, something that kept him away from the house until late. When he was home, he seemed distracted, distant. Not the boy who used to bring me dandelions and called them flowers. Not the young man who'd cried at his father's funeral and promised to take care of me. This Gregory looked through me more than at me. But Nora was always there. Always watching. Always helpful in a way that felt less like kindness and more like surveillance. She took over my mail first. Oh, Mom, you don't need to worry about bills anymore. We'll handle everything. Then my bank account. Just to make things easier. You shouldn't stress about money at your age. Then my phone calls. Who are you talking to? Was that Helen? What did she want? Each small surrender felt reasonable in the moment. Each one made sense when she explained it with that patient voice people use for children and the elderly. But together, they built a cage so slowly, I didn't notice the bars until they'd already locked. 3 months in, I started having dizzy spells. Real ones, not just the grogginess from whatever she was putting in my food. The room would tilt sideways, and I'd have to grab onto furniture to keep from falling. We need to get you to a doctor, Nora had said, her face creased with concern that almost looked real. I know just the one. Dr. Langford. He's the best in Charleston. That's how I ended up in his office. That's how I ended up with a note that said, "Run for your safety." Now, standing in this kitchen with a cup of tea I hadn't asked for, I understood something that made my blood run cold. This house had never been a home. It had been a trap from the start, and I'd walked right into it, grateful for the cage they'd built around me. Nora handed me the teacup, her fingers lingering on mine just a second too long. Drink up while it's hot, Margaret. You know how you love your evening tea. I took the cup. The porcelain felt delicate in my shaking hands. Steam rose between us like a curtain, and through that steam, I saw her smile shift. Just slightly. Just enough to show me that she knew something I didn't. Or maybe she knew something I'd only just figured out. Dr. Langford's office had smelled like antiseptic and old magazines, the kind of smell that's supposed to be comforting but just makes you think about sickness. I'd sat in the waiting room for 20 minutes, watching other patients come and go, wondering why Gregory had insisted on this particular doctor. He's the best, my son had said. Nora's family has been going to him for years. He'll take good care of you, Mom. The nurse called my name, and I followed her down a narrow hallway lined with generic landscape paintings. Mountains and lakes and forests that could have been anywhere or nowhere. The kind of art that exists just to fill empty walls. The examination room was small. Cold. I sat on the paper-covered table, my feet dangling like a child's, and waited. When Dr. Langford walked in, the first thing I noticed was his hands. They were shaking. Just slightly, but enough that the clipboard rattled when he set it down. "Mrs. Ellington," he said, his voice careful. Measured. "I'm Dr. Langford. How are you feeling today?" "Tired, mostly," I'd answered honestly. "Confused sometimes. My memory isn't what it used to be." He nodded slowly, his eyes searching my face like he was looking for something specific. "Tell me about your daily routine. What does a typical day look like?" Strange question for a first visit, but I answered anyway. Told him about the pills Nora brought me every morning and evening, about the meals delivered to my room, about the fog that settled over my mind most afternoons, thick and impenetrable. His jaw tightened. And who prepares your medications? Who decides what you take? My daughter-in-law, Nora. She's very organized about it. Keeps everything on a schedule. Something flickered across his face. Fear, maybe. Or recognition. Mrs. Ellington, do you ever feel unusually drowsy after eating? The question landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples through my thoughts.
Yes.
Almost every night. Sometimes at lunch too. It's like my body just shuts down whether I want it to or not. He wrote something on his clipboard, but his hand was shaking harder now. The pen scratched across the paper in jagged lines. And these memory lapses, how often do they occur? Daily, I whispered. The admission hurt, made it real. Sometimes I can't remember conversations I had an hour ago. Sometimes I find things moved in my room, and I don't remember moving them. Dr. Langford set down his pen and looked at me directly for the first time. Really looked at me. His eyes were dark, serious, and filled with something that made my stomach drop. He glanced at the door, then back at me, then at the door again. Mrs. Ellington, I need to run some standard tests. Blood work, blood pressure, the usual. But I want you to know, he paused, choosing his words carefully. I want you to know that sometimes our bodies tell us things our minds don't want to hear. Do you understand? I didn't.
Not then.
But I nodded anyway. The exam was thorough. He checked my heart, my lungs, my reflexes. Drew blood. Asked more questions about my living situation, about Gregory and Nora, about whether I felt safe. That last question made me pause. Should I not feel safe? He didn't answer directly. Just said, everyone deserves to feel safe in their own home, Mrs. Ellington. When the exam was over, he walked me to the checkout desk himself. Unusual for a doctor, but I didn't think much of it at the time. He handed me my appointment card for a follow-up visit, making small talk about the weather, about how Charleston was beautiful this time of year. His hand brushed mine as he passed me the card, and that's when I felt it.
Paper.
Extra paper beneath the card. Our eyes met. He gave the smallest shake of his head, "Don't look now," and said loudly enough for the receptionist to hear, "Take care of yourself, Mrs. Ellington. And please, don't ignore any symptoms you're experiencing. They matter." The emphasis on those last two words felt deliberate.
Heavy.
If a stranger handed you a secret note, would you read it right away or wait until you were alone? Let me know in the comments below. I'd waited until I was in my car, hands trembling so badly I could barely unfold the paper. And there it was. 4 words that changed everything. Run for your safety. Now, 2 hours later, I stood in Nora's kitchen holding a cup of tea I didn't trust, trying to keep my face neutral while my heart hammered against my ribs. "You seem quiet tonight," Nora said, settling into the chair across from me. She hadn't poured herself any tea. Just sat there, watching me with those sharp eyes. "Everything okay?" "Just tired," I lied. It was a long appointment. Did Dr. Langford say anything concerning? Any health issues I should know about? There was something in her voice. Something too casual, too interested. Like she was fishing for information she already had. "No, nothing concerning. Just routine tests."
Good.
"That's good." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You know we worry about you, Margaret. Gregory, and I just want to make sure you're taken care of." Taken care of. Those words used to sound comforting. Now, they sounded like a threat. I raised the teacup to my lips, letting the steam warm my face. But I didn't drink. Couldn't. Not with Dr. Langford's warning burning in my mind. "Actually," I said, setting the cup down, "I'm not feeling well. I think I need to lie down." Nora's smile tightened. "But you haven't touched your tea. I made it special for you." "I know, and I appreciate it. But my head is pounding. Maybe I'm coming down with something." For a long moment, she didn't move. Just stared at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Then she stood, smoothing her dress. Of course.
You need your rest.
Let me help you upstairs.
No, no.
I can manage. But she was already at my side, her hand firm on my elbow. I insist. We can't have you falling on the stairs. She guided me up each step, her grip never loosening. At my bedroom door, she paused. Make sure you take your evening medication, Margaret. It's on your nightstand. You know how important it is to stay on schedule. I nodded, desperate to get away from her. And Margaret? Her voice dropped lower. Did you happen to see anyone else at the doctor's office today? Talk to anyone?
My throat went dry.
Just the doctor and nurse. Why? No reason. Just curious. She smiled that too perfect smile. Sleep well. She pulled my door closed, and I heard it. Clear as anything. The soft click of a lock. I stood frozen with my hand on the doorknob, listening. Silence pressed against my eardrums. Then footsteps. Nora's heels clicking down the hall, down the stairs, fading into the depths of the house. I tried the door. It didn't budge. My bedroom door locked from the outside. When had that happened? How had I never noticed? Because you trusted them, a voice whispered in my head. Because you wanted so badly to believe your son loved you that you ignored every warning sign. I backed away from the door, my legs weak. The room suddenly felt smaller. The pretty yellow walls looked like they were closing in. This wasn't a guest room. It was a cell dressed up with throw pillows and fresh flowers. Think, Margaret. Think. I went to the window first. Second floor, but there was a roof over the porch below. Maybe I could climb out, make it down somehow. But when I tried to open it, the window wouldn't budge. Painted shut, or maybe nailed. Hard to tell, in the fading light. My purse sat on the dresser where I'd dropped it. I grabbed it with shaking hands and pulled out Dr. Langford's note, reading those 4 words again like they might have changed. They hadn't. Run for your safety. But how do you run when you're locked in? I sank onto the bed, forcing myself to breathe slowly. Panic wouldn't help. Panic would just make me sloppy, and I needed to be sharp. Sharper than I'd been in months. The medication bottles sat on my nightstand, exactly where Nora said they'd be. 3 bottles, 3 different pills. I picked up the first one, squinting at the label in the lamplight. Margaret Ellington. Take 1 daily for blood pressure. But I'd never had blood pressure problems before moving here. Harold was the one with high blood pressure, not me. The second bottle, take 1 daily for anxiety. I wasn't anxious until I came here. The third, take 1 nightly as needed for sleep. Except I didn't need help sleeping. I needed help staying awake. What have you been giving me, Nora? I opened the first bottle and shook a pill into my palm. It was small, white, unmarked. Could have been anything. I didn't recognize it, but then again, pills all looked the same to me. On impulse, I went to the bathroom and dropped it in the toilet. Watched it sink to the bottom, dissolving slowly. The water turned faintly cloudy. Then I did the same with the other 2 pills. Watched them disappear down the drain. Whatever they were, I wasn't taking them tonight. Do you think she made the right choice? Or should she have kept the pills as evidence? Comment your thoughts. I changed into my nightgown, turned off the lamp, and climbed into bed. But I didn't close my eyes. Just lay there in the darkness, listening. The house settled around me with creaks and groans. Somewhere downstairs, I heard the murmur of voices. Gregory must be home. I strained to make out words, but they were too distant, too muffled. Then footsteps on the stairs again. They stopped outside my door. I closed my eyes, forcing my breathing to stay slow and even. Pretending to sleep had become my greatest skill these past months. The door opened, so she had a key, of course she did, and soft footsteps crossed the room. I felt her presence beside the bed, felt her eyes on me. Every muscle in my body wanted to tense up, to flinch away, but I kept myself still. After what felt like forever, she moved away. I heard her in the bathroom, heard the toilet flush. Was she checking? Making sure I'd taken the pills? The footsteps retreated. The door closed. The lock clicked. I waited another 10 minutes before opening my eyes. The darkness felt different now. Less safe. Like it was hiding things I didn't want to see. I thought about Harold. About how he used to check all the locks before bed, a habit that drove me crazy back when I thought locked doors kept you safe. Can't be too careful, sunshine, he'd say. Oh, Harold. You were right about so many things. Sleep should have been impossible, but exhaustion pulled me under anyway. Fitful, uneasy sleep filled with dreams of locked rooms and smiling faces that melted into skulls. I woke to voices.
Not dreams this time.
Real voices, low and urgent, coming from somewhere close. I blinked in the darkness, disoriented. The clock on my nightstand read 2:47 a.m. The voices were coming from a hallway, right outside my door. Can't keep doing this. Gregory's voice, strained. Upset. We don't have a choice. Nora, calm as ever. We're too far in now. She's my mother. And she's standing between us and everything we've worked for. Don't go soft on me now, Gregory. Not when we're this close. Silence. Then Gregory again, quieter. How much longer? The doctor's getting suspicious. We need to speed things up. My heart stopped. Actually stopped or felt like it did. What if someone finds out? Who's going to find out? She doesn't talk to anyone. Helen calls, but we monitor those. The neighbors think she's losing her mind. We've made sure of that. And once it's done, it'll look natural. An elderly woman in declining health. These things happen. These things happen. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. Tears streamed down my face, hot and silent. I don't know if I can. Yes, you can. Think about what we get. The house. The accounts. The insurance. Everything. We just need a little more time. Footsteps moved away. A door closed somewhere down the hall. I lay in the darkness, shaking so hard the bed creaked. My own son, my own flesh and blood, the baby I'd rocked and fed and loved, was planning to. I couldn't even think the word. But I knew. God help me, I knew. The fog in my head, the dizzy spells, the memory problems, none of it was real. It was them. Whatever they were giving me, it was making me sick. Making me seem sick. Making me look like I was dying naturally. I got up on trembling legs and went to the bathroom, turned on the tap to cover any sound, and splashed cold water on my face. Looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back looked old.
Frail.
Helpless. But she wasn't. Not yet. I thought about Dr. Langford's note. About the way his hands had shaken when he passed it to me. He knew. Somehow he knew what they were doing. I had to get out. Had to get to someone who could help. But first I had to make them think nothing had changed. I dried my face and climbed back into bed, my mind racing. Tomorrow, I'd play the role they expected. Confused Margaret. Forgetful Margaret. Weak, declining Margaret. But at night, when they thought I was sleeping, I'd stay awake. I'd watch. I'd listen. And I'd find a way out of this locked room before they found a way to put me in a coffin. The morning light crept through the curtains, and I heard the lock turn. Time to pretend. Nora brought breakfast on a tray like always. Oatmeal with brown sugar, toast with butter, orange juice, and 3 pills in a little paper cup. Morning, Margaret, she said brightly, setting the tray on my lap. How did you sleep? I smiled weakly. Like the dead. Her face didn't change, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. That's good. You need your rest. She stood there, waiting, watching. I picked up the paper cup and brought it to my lips, tipping my head back. The pills touched my tongue, bitter, chemical, but I didn't swallow. Just held them there, took a sip of juice, and made a show of swallowing. Good girl, Nora said, and my skin crawled. I need to run some errands this morning. Will you be okay on your own for a few hours? I nodded, keeping the pills tucked in my cheek. They were starting to dissolve, burning my gums. As soon as she left, I spit them into a tissue and threw it in the trash. Then I ate the oatmeal, checking each bite carefully. It tasted normal. Maybe she only drugged the pills. Or maybe I was getting paranoid. Either way, I couldn't afford to waste food. I needed strength. The lock clicked open again around noon. Nora popped her head in. Just checking on you. Still feeling okay? A bit dizzy, I lied. Maybe I'll take a nap. That's probably best. She closed the door and the lock clicked shut again. I waited until her car pulled out of the driveway before moving. Then I tore my room apart, looking for anything I could use. A phone. A weapon. Anything. Nothing. They'd been thorough. But then I remembered my Bible. The note from Dr. Langford was still hidden inside it, pressed between the pages of Psalms. I pulled it out, unfolded it, and stared at those 4 words again. He'd risked something to warn me. His career, maybe. His safety, possibly. I needed to get back to him. Needed him to know I understood. That I believed him. But how? The house was too far from town to walk. Even if I could get out. And they'd taken my car keys weeks ago, said it was for my own safety after I'd supposedly gotten confused and ended up on the wrong side of town. Another lie. Another piece of the cage. Think, Margaret. My eyes fell on the landline phone I'd seen in the hallway. They didn't know I'd noticed it. But getting to it meant getting out of this room when someone was home. And even then, who would I call? The police? And tell them what? That I think my family is poisoning me, but I have no proof? They'd think I was crazy. Exactly what Nora wanted them to think.
No.
I needed evidence first. Something concrete. I went back to the bathroom and pulled out the remaining pills from the bottles Nora had left. Wrapped them carefully in tissue and tucked them into my Bible. If I could get these to Dr. Langford, he could test them. Prove what they really were. The afternoon dragged. I lay on the bed, pretending to sleep, when I heard footsteps. The lock turned several times, Nora checking on me, making sure I was still under. But my mind was clearer than it had been in months. Without whatever they'd been giving me, the fog was lifting. Memory was trickling back. I remembered now, the first week I'd been here. I'd had energy.
Clarity.
I'd unpacked my own boxes, hung my own pictures. But then Nora had insisted I start taking vitamins with breakfast. Said they'd help me adjust. That's when it started. The tiredness. The confusion. How long had they been planning this? The thought made me sick. Evening came. Gregory brought dinner this time, and my heart ached at the sight of him. He looked tired.
Guilty. Good.
He should feel guilty. "Hey, Mom," he said softly, setting the tray down. "Nora said you had a rough day." I made my voice small and confused. Did I? I can't quite remember. Pain crossed his face. Real pain, or was he acting too? "The doctor called," he said. "Wants you to come back for follow-up. Says your blood work showed some concerns." My pulse jumped, but I kept my expression blank. "Oh."
Yeah.
"We've scheduled it for tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. Tomorrow. I'd be able to see Dr. Langford tomorrow, if I could just make it until then."
That's good, I said.
"I do feel a bit off lately." Gregory nodded, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. "Take your medication, okay? It's important." He left quickly, like he couldn't bear to stay in the room. I waited until dark, until the house went quiet, before spitting out the pills again. My mouth tasted like metal and chemicals. I brushed my teeth 3 times, but the taste wouldn't go away. Midnight came and went. I lay in bed, wide awake, listening to the house breathe around me. Then I heard it again. Voices outside my door. "Tomorrow morning. The doctor wants to see her." Gregory's voice. "I know. He's been suspicious ever since she went last time." Nora annoyed. "We need to be careful. Maybe we should cancel." "We can't. That'll look worse."
Silence.
"Then, fine. But I'm coming with her. And you're staying home." I'll handle the doctor. Handle the doctor. What did that mean? My blood ran cold. Was Dr. Langford in danger too? Had he put himself at risk to warn me? I had to find a way to tell him, to warn him that Nora knew he was suspicious. But I was locked in this room with no phone, no way out, and a follow-up appointment in the morning that suddenly felt like a trap instead of a rescue. Think, Margaret. Think. The voices faded. Footsteps retreated. The house settled back into its oppressive silence. I got up and went to the window again, studying it in the moonlight. The paint was thick where the frame met the sill. Maybe if I could chip it away, work at it all night. A sound made me freeze. A key turning in my lock. At 1 a.m, I dove back into bed, pulling the covers up, forcing my breathing to slow. The door opened. Footsteps crossed the room. And then, inches from my face, I heard Nora's voice, barely a whisper. I know you're awake, Margaret. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to move, to run, to do something. But I stayed frozen under those covers, keeping my breathing steady even as my heart tried to punch through my ribs. Nora's perfume filled the space between us. That same sharp, chemical smell from the day I'd arrived. I know what you did with the pills, she whispered. Did you really think I wouldn't check the toilet? The trash. My mind raced. Play dead or play dumb. I stirred slightly, mumbling like someone waking from deep sleep. Nora? What's wrong? Don't. Her voice cut through the darkness. We're past that now. I opened my eyes. She stood beside the bed, backlit by the hallway light. In her hand, she held a syringe. Fear shot through me like electricity. What is that? My voice came out steadier than I felt. Insurance, she said simply. You're making this harder than it needs to be, Margaret. All you had to do was take your medicine. Go quietly. But no, you had to get clever. I sat up slowly, keeping the blanket between us like it could somehow protect me. Does Gregory know you're here? Something flickered across her face. Gregory's asleep.
He takes his own pills for that now.
Can't handle the guilt, poor thing. You're drugging your own husband? When necessary. She took a step closer. He loves you too much. It makes him weak. But he'll get over it. People always do. My eyes darted to the door. Still open. If I could just get past her. Don't even think about it, Nora said, reading my mind. You're 71 years old with a heart condition. I'm 42, and I run 5 miles every morning. How far do you think you'd get? She wasn't wrong. But I had something she didn't. I'd stopped taking whatever poison she'd been feeding me. My mind was clear, sharper than it had been in months. Why? I asked, buying time. Why go through all this? If you needed money, I would have helped you. She laughed. Actually laughed. Helped us? You mean given us scraps while you sat on a fortune? Harold's life insurance. The pension. The house in Charleston that's worth $500,000 now. And you were just going to sit there, living forever, while we struggled. You live in a mansion. Mortgage to the roof, she snapped. Gregory's business is failing. Has been for 2 years. We're drowning in debt. But you had solutions. You just had to die first. The casual way she said it made my stomach turn. And the doctor? I asked. Dr. Langford figured it out, didn't he? Her jaw tightened. That meddling fool should have minded his own business. Your blood work showed the sedatives. He started asking questions. But tomorrow, I'll make sure he understands what happens to people who interfere. That did it. She wasn't just threatening me anymore. She was threatening an innocent man who'd tried to help. Would you risk everything to save a stranger who saved you first? Let me know what you'd do. You won't get away with this, I said. I already have. She moved closer, syringe raised. 1 injection. You'll go to sleep. Your heart will stop, stress, the doctor will say. Grief from losing Harold. It happens all the time with elderly widows. And tomorrow, Dr. Langford will sign whatever death certificate I need him to sign, or I'll make sure he loses everything. She was insane. Completely, utterly insane. And she was 3 feet away. I did the only thing I could think of. I screamed.
Loud. Piercing.
The kind of scream that shatters silence and sleep and carefully laid plans. Nora lunged forward, trying to cover my mouth, but I rolled sideways off the bed. Hit the floor hard. Pain shot through my hip, but I kept screaming. Shut up. Nora hissed, coming around the bed. Shut up, you stupid old. A door slammed somewhere in the house. Mom. Gregory's voice, groggy and confused. What's going on? Nora froze. The syringe gleamed in her hand. Footsteps pounded up the stairs. She looked at me, and I saw calculation flash across her face. Then she dropped the syringe, kicked it under the bed, and arranged her expression into one of concern. Gregory, she called out. Thank God. Your mother fell. I heard her crying out. Gregory burst into the room, his hair messed up, wearing pajama pants and a wrinkled t-shirt. He looked between us, taking in the scene. Me on the floor. Nora standing over me. I just fell, I said quickly, before Nora could spin her lies. I was trying to use the bathroom, and I tripped. But Gregory's eyes had found something. He bent down, reaching under the bed.
No.
No, please don't let him find. He straightened up, holding the syringe. The room went dead silent. What is this? He asked quietly. Nora's face drained of color. That's not.
What is
this? Each word came out harder than the last. Your mother's medication, Nora tried. The doctor prescribed. My mother doesn't take injections, Gregory said.
His voice had changed.
Something in it had broken, or maybe finally woken up. And even if she did, you're not a nurse. So I'll ask you one more time. What is this? The silence stretched like taffy. Then Nora's mask cracked. You know what it is.
We talked about this.
We agreed. We agreed to what? Gregory's voice rose. To put my mother in a locked bedroom and feed her sedatives? To make her think she was losing her mind? He looked at the syringe again, and horror washed over his face. Oh my God. Were you going to kill her? Tonight? We're losing everything. Nora screamed. The careful facade shattered completely. The business, the house, everything. She's sitting on a fortune while we're drowning. I was solving our problems. By murdering my mother? By doing what you were too weak to do. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Gregory looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw him see everything. The locked door. The pills. The months of confusion and fog. His face crumpled. Mom, he whispered. What have I done? Call the police, I said from the floor, my voice shaking. Call them now. Nora moved fast. She grabbed the syringe from Gregory's hand and backed toward the door. You call the police, and I'll tell them she's delusional. That she attacked me. That you both. There's a security camera in the hallway, Gregory said flatly. I installed it last month after we had that break-in scare. It's been recording everything. Nora went pale. You're lying. Am I? He pulled out his phone. Want to watch the footage of you coming into this room at 1 a.m. with a syringe? Her hand tightened on the needle. For a moment, I thought she might actually use it on him. But then something in her deflated. The fight went out of her all at once, and she just stood there, holding the weapon that would have ended my life. I want a lawyer, she said finally. Gregory called 911. His hand shook so badly, he could barely hold the phone. And as we waited for the sirens, I stayed on that floor, too shaken to move, too relieved to cry, thinking about how close I'd come to dying in this pretty yellow room that never felt like home. The police arrived in 17 minutes. I counted every second. 2 officers, one older with gray at his temples, one younger, who couldn't have been more than 25, took one look at the scene and separated us all. Gregory went downstairs. Nora was put in the hallway, a female officer watching her. And I was left with the older cop, Officer Martinez, who helped me into a chair and spoke in the gentle voice people use with trauma victims. Mrs. Ellington, can you tell me what happened tonight? Where did I even start? With the locked door? The poison pills? The 6 months of systematic abuse disguised as care? I took a breath and pulled out my Bible from the nightstand drawer. The note from Dr. Langford fluttered out, along with the tissue-wrapped pills I'd saved. It started with this, I said, handing him the note. Officer Martinez read it, his expression darkening. When did you receive this? Yesterday. From my doctor. He suspected. My voice cracked. He suspected my family was poisoning me. The younger officer came in then, holding an evidence bag. Inside was the syringe Nora had dropped. Found this under the bed, he said. The daughter-in-law claims it's insulin for the victim's diabetes. I don't have diabetes, I said. Martinez's jaw tightened. We'll test it. He looked at the pills I'd given him. These too. Mrs. Ellington, I need you to tell me everything from the beginning.
Can you do that? So, I did.
All of it. Moving in after Harold died. The locked bedroom. The medication that made me foggy and confused. Nora taking over my finances. The dizzy spells. Dr. Langford's warnings. The conversation I'd overheard about speeding things up. By the time I finished, Martinez's expression had gone from concerned to furious. We need to take you to the hospital, he said. Get your blood tested. Document any injuries. And Dr. Langford, I added quickly. Nora said she was going to handle him tomorrow. I think she was planning to threaten him or... I couldn't finish the sentence. Martinez spoke into his radio immediately. Within minutes, I heard him confirm that a squad car was being sent to Dr. Langford's home to check on him. They let me call someone while we waited for the ambulance. I could have called anyone. A lawyer. A friend. But there was only one person I wanted. Helen answered on the second ring, her voice thick with sleep. Margaret? It's 2 a.m. Helen. I whispered, and then the tears came. Everything I'd been holding back crashed over me like a wave. I need you. I'm coming, she said immediately. Where are you? Still at Gregory's. But Helen. I swallowed hard. They were trying to kill me. Silence. Then, I'm already getting dressed. Don't you move. I'll be there in 40 minutes. She made it in 35. Have you ever had someone show up for you when you needed them most? That's what real family looks like. Drop a comment if you agree. The hospital was cold and bright and filled with people who asked the same questions over and over. They drew blood, took x-rays, photographed the bruises on my arms where Nora had gripped me too hard. A doctor who reminded me of Harold examined me thoroughly and kept shaking his head. Your blood work shows high levels of benzodiazepines and diphenhydramine, he said. Those are sedatives and antihistamines. In these doses, over time, they would absolutely cause confusion, memory problems, and excessive drowsiness. Enough to kill someone? Helen asked sharply. She'd barely left my side since arriving. Potentially, the doctor admitted, especially in an elderly patient. The combination could cause respiratory depression, cardiac issues, or she could have fallen and hit her head during one of the dizzy spells. It would have looked natural. Helen's hand found mine and squeezed hard. They kept me overnight for observation. Helen slept in the chair beside my bed, refusing to leave even when the nurses suggested she go home. I left you alone once, she said quietly. When you moved in with Gregory. I should have fought harder to stop you. Should have trusted my gut that something was off with that woman. You couldn't have known, I told her. I should have tried harder. Morning came with watery sunlight and a visit from Detective Chen, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who specialized in elder abuse cases. Mrs. Ellington, she said, settling into the chair Helen vacated. I need to ask you some questions about your finances. That's when I learned the full extent of it. Nora had opened credit cards in my name, taken out a home equity loan against my house in Charleston, transferred money from my accounts into offshore holdings. In 6 months, she'd stolen over $300,000. We're still tracking it all down, Detective Chin said. But it's extensive. This was planned, Mrs. Ellington. Carefully, and over a long period. My head spun. And Gregory? She hesitated. He claims he didn't know about the extent of it. Says his wife told him they were just consolidating your assets to make things easier. But he did admit to knowing about the medication changes and the locked bedroom door. What will happen to him? That depends on the DA. At minimum, he'll be charged as an accessory. At maximum, she paused. He was complicit in your imprisonment and poisoning, even if he didn't administer the drugs himself. My son, my baby boy, the child I'd rocked and sung to and protected from everything. And he'd locked me in a room to die. Detective Chun left me with papers to sign, statements to review, evidence to confirm. Helen made coffee runs and fielded phone calls and told the nurses exactly what I needed before I even knew I needed it. And Dr. Langford came to visit that afternoon. He looked pale, shaken, but alive. The police had reached him in time. Nora had been planning to visit him before my appointment, armed with threats about his license and career if he didn't cooperate. I'm so sorry, he said, standing awkwardly at the foot of my bed. I should have done more. Called the police myself instead of just leaving you that note. You saved my life, I told him simply. That note made me pay attention, made me stop taking the pills. Without it, I'd be dead. His eyes were wet. I wasn't sure you'd understand. Wasn't sure you'd believe me. I believed you, I said, even when I didn't want to. He stayed for 20 minutes, explaining how he'd noticed the sedative levels in my blood work, how my symptoms didn't match any natural disease progression, how he'd suspected but couldn't prove anything without putting me in danger. Some doctors would have looked the other way, Helen said after he left. Been too afraid to get involved. But he didn't, I said. He saw something wrong and he acted. That night, alone in my hospital room with Helen snoring softly in the chair, I thought about all the people who could have helped me sooner if I'd just spoken up. If I'd trusted my instincts instead of doubting my own mind. But I'd been trained to be polite, to not make waves, to trust family above all else. That training had almost killed me. The pills they tested from my stash came back positive for everything the doctor suspected. The syringe Nora had brought to my room? Insulin. Enough to send a non-diabetic into fatal hypoglycemic shock. She really had been planning to kill me that night. The detective told me they'd found text messages between Gregory and Nora. Arguments about the plan and how much longer, and we can't back out now. Evidence that he'd known more than he claimed. We're building a strong case, Detective Chin assured me. This is going to trial. I nodded, but inside I felt hollow. A trial meant facing them, meant dredging up every horrible detail in front of strangers. Will you be strong enough? Helen asked gently. To testify? I looked at her, this fierce woman who'd driven through the night to save me, who'd believed me without question. I have to be, I said. Not just for me, but for every other person whose family sees them as an obstacle instead of a human being. And I thought about Dr. Langford's trembling hands passing me that note, about the risk he took for a patient he barely knew. Justice doesn't always come easy. Sometimes it comes with trembling hands and whispered warnings and the courage to believe that something is wrong even when everyone tells you you're imagining it. The weeks before the trial passed in a blur of lawyers and depositions and paperwork that never seemed to end. Helen moved me into her guest house, a small cottage behind her main property that overlooked the ocean. It was quiet there, peaceful, everything Gregory's house hadn't been. I started sleeping without medication for the first time in months. The nightmares came, vivid, terrible dreams where Nora stood over me with that syringe, where locked doors stretched into infinity, where I screamed and no one heard. But Helen was always there when I woke up gasping, ready with tea and tissues, and the kind of no-nonsense comfort only a sister-in-law can provide. You're safe now, she'd remind me. The doors here don't lock from the outside. Simple words. But they mattered. My lawyer was a woman named Patricia Ramsey, who specialized in elder abuse cases. She had gray hair cut short and reading glasses on a chain, and the kind of sharp intelligence that made me feel, for the first time in months, like someone was actually on my side. This is a strong case, she told me during our first meeting. Between the blood evidence, the financial records, the texts, and Dr. Langford's testimony, we can prove systematic abuse, attempted murder, and elder exploitation. What about Gregory? I asked. Her expression softened. He's cooperating with prosecutors. Agreed to testify against Nora in exchange for a reduced sentence. He'll likely serve time, but significantly less than his wife. My son would go to prison. The thought sat heavy in my chest. Patricia seemed to read my mind. I know this is hard. He's your child. But he made choices, Margaret. Adult choices that endangered your life. She was right. But that didn't make it hurt less. The preliminary hearings were brutal. I had to sit in a courtroom while lawyers argued about evidence and timelines and whether certain texts were admissible. Nora sat across the room in an orange jumpsuit, her hair pulled back, makeup gone. She looked smaller somehow, less threatening. But when our eyes met, I saw no remorse. Just cold calculation, like she was already planning her defense. Do you think some people are born without empathy, or do they learn it? Share your thoughts in the comments. The trial date was set for September. 3 months away. 3 months to prepare, to go over my testimony again and again until Patricia was satisfied I could handle the defense's cross-examination. They're going to try to paint you as confused, she warned me. A grieving widow who imagined abuse because she was lonely and medicated. They'll use your age against you, suggest you were already experiencing cognitive decline before you moved in with Gregory. But the blood tests prove you had sedatives in your system. They'll argue you were taking them willingly, that Nora was just helping manage your medications. The locked bedroom? Safety measure for a woman with dizzy spells. The syringe? Mistake. Meant for someone else. Anything but attempted murder. My stomach churned. Will they believe me? Patricia looked at me over her glasses. That depends on how you testify. Juries want to see strength, Margaret.
Conviction.
If you seem uncertain or confused, they'll doubt everything. So I practiced. Went over every detail with Patricia until I could recite the timeline in my sleep. Learned to keep my voice steady, my answers clear and direct. Learned not to let emotion overwhelm the facts. Dr. Langford came to see me several times during those months. We'd sit on Helen's porch, drinking coffee and watching the waves, and he'd apologize for things that weren't his fault. I keep thinking I should have acted sooner, he said. Called Adult Protective Services. Filed a report. You gave me the warning I needed. I reminded him. That note saved my life. But it almost got you killed. If Nora had found it. She didn't. I'm here. I'm alive. I squeezed his hand. You did good, doctor. Don't let anyone tell you different. He'd signed on to testify, despite the risk to his practice. Some of his patients had already left, uncomfortable with the attention his involvement had brought. But he never wavered. Some things are more important than business, he said simply. August came with heat and humidity that made the air feel thick enough to swim through. I spent my days preparing for trial and my evenings walking the beach with Helen, letting the ocean wash away the worst of the fear. You ready for this? Helen asked one evening, as we watched the sun set. No, I admitted, but I'm doing it anyway. She smiled. That's the Margaret I remember. The one who stood up to the PTA when they tried to ban books from the school library. The one who organized that whole charity drive when the Johnson family lost their house. That was 40 years ago. Courage doesn't have an expiration date, she said firmly. The first day of trial arrived with clear skies and a knot in my stomach the size of Texas. Patricia met me at the courthouse, looking professional and fierce in a navy suit. Remember, she said as we walked up those stone steps. Tell the truth.
Stay calm.
Don't let the defense attorney rattle you. The courtroom was bigger than I expected. High ceilings. Dark wood everywhere. A judge's bench that loomed over everything like a throne. And there, at the defense table, sat Nora. She'd lost weight in jail. Her skin was pale, hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked nothing like the polished woman who'd welcomed me to Charleston with a smile and poisoned tea. Gregory wasn't there. He'd already testified during the preliminary hearings, his cooperation securing him a plea deal that Patricia said was generous considering his involvement.
I didn't know how to feel about that.
Relief? Anger? Grief? All of it, maybe. The jury filed in, 12 strangers who would decide Nora's fate and, in a way, validate whether what happened to me actually mattered. Whether an elderly woman's suffering counted as real. Judge Morrison, a black woman in her 60s with intelligent eyes, called the court to order. The state of South Carolina versus Nora Ellington, she announced. Let's proceed. The prosecutor, a man named Daniel Warren, gave his opening statement. Outlined the systematic abuse, the financial theft, the attempted murder. His voice was steady, factual, devastating. Then Nora's lawyer stood up. Marcus Fleming was everything I'd expected from a defense attorney. Expensive suit, perfect hair, a smile that probably cost as much as a car. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, this is a case about a family in crisis. About a confused elderly woman, struggling with grief and cognitive decline, who misinterpreted the loving care of her daughter-in-law as something sinister. My hands clenched in my lap. He painted Nora as a devoted caregiver, overwhelmed by the demands of caring for a deteriorating mother-in-law. Painted me as unreliable, possibly suffering from early dementia, desperate to assign blame for my own failing health. The prosecution wants you to believe this is attempted murder, Fleming said smoothly. But where's the motive? Mrs. Ellington was a beloved member of the family. There was no financial gain. That's a lie, I whispered. Patricia put a hand on my arm. We'll prove it. Be patient. The first witness was Dr. Langford. He took the stand with visible nervousness, adjusting his tie 3 times before the prosecutor even asked the first question. But once he started talking, his voice grew stronger. He explained the blood work results, the red flags he'd noticed, the decision to pass me that warning note. Why didn't you call the police? Fleming asked during cross-examination. I had no proof, Dr. Langford admitted. Just suspicions based on inconsistent symptoms and unusual drug levels. I was afraid that if I reported it without concrete evidence, Mrs. Ellington would be left alone with people who might retaliate. So you took it upon yourself to play detective? I took it upon myself to warn a patient I believed was in danger. Fleming smirked. And how many other patients have you passed secret notes to, doctor? Objection, Patricia called out. Argumentative. Sustained, Judge Morrison said. The questioning went on. Financial experts testified about the stolen money. Police officers described the scene they'd found that night. The toxicologist explained how the combination of drugs in my system would have gradually destroyed my cognitive function and could have easily caused fatal complications. And then it was my turn. I walked to the witness stand on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. The bailiff held out a Bible, and I placed my hand on it, swearing to tell the truth even though the truth was what had gotten me locked in that yellow bedroom in the first place. State your name for the record, the prosecutor said gently. Margaret and Ellington. Mrs. Ellington, can you tell the court how you came to live with the defendant? I took a breath and began. Told them about Harold's death, about the grief that made the world feel empty, about Gregory's invitation that seemed like a lifeline. My voice stayed steady. Patricia had trained me well. I described the first days in their home, the way Nora took control of everything so gradually I barely noticed. The locked bedroom door that appeared one night without explanation. For your safety, she'd said. And the medication? Warren prompted. 3 pills, every morning and evening. Nora said they were for my heart, my blood pressure, my memory. But I'd never had those problems before. I looked directly at the jury. Within weeks, I could barely think straight. I'd forget conversations, fall asleep in the middle of the day. My hands would shake so badly I couldn't hold a cup of coffee. Fleming watched me like a hawk, taking notes. Warren walked me through it all. The stolen money I didn't know about. The power of attorney I didn't remember signing. The conversations I'd overheard about speeding things up and how much longer. And then you visited Dr. Langford, Warren said. Yes. I pulled out the note from my purse. Patricia had insisted I keep it with me. He gave me this. Warren held it up for the jury. Run for your safety. For words that changed everything. What did you think when you read that? I thought he was wrong, I admitted. I didn't want to believe my family would hurt me. But then I started paying attention. Really paying attention. I described watching Nora stir my tea, the green tint when I poured it down the sink, the pills that didn't match their labels. And the night of your alleged attack. My hands clenched. Nora came to my room at 1 a.m. I'd stopped taking the medication, so I was awake. She had a syringe. She told me. My voice cracked, and I steadied it. She told me she was going to inject me with insulin, that my heart would stop, and it would look natural. The courtroom was dead silent. Why didn't she succeed? I screamed. Gregory heard me. He came upstairs and found her with a syringe. Warren nodded. Thank you, Mrs. Ellington. No further questions. Then Fleming stood up, and I braced myself. Mrs. Ellington, he began, his voice dripping with false sympathy. You've been through a terrible ordeal. Losing your husband, moving to a new home, dealing with health issues. That must have been very stressful. It was. And stress can affect memory, can it? Especially in someone your age. There it was. My memory was fine until I started taking the pills Nora gave me. But you're 71 years old. Isn't it possible you were already experiencing some cognitive decline? That the medications were actually helping you? The toxicology report. Yes, the report showing you had sedatives in your system. But my client says those were prescribed by Dr. Langford for your anxiety. Do you remember being anxious, Mrs. Ellington? Would you stay calm if someone twisted your truth like this? Comment if you're still with Margaret. I remember being afraid. I said clearly. Afraid of the woman who locked me in a room and poisoned me for 6 months. Fleming's smile tightened. Let's talk about that locked door. Your bedroom door locked from the outside. You claim this was to imprison you. But isn't it true you had dizzy spells? That you'd fallen before? I fell because of the drug she was giving me. Or you fell because you're an elderly woman with balance issues. The lock was a safety measure, wasn't it? To keep you from wandering at night and getting hurt. Safety measures don't involve syringes full of insulin. Ah, yes, the syringe. He picked up an evidence bag. My client maintains this was medication for her own diabetes management, accidentally brought into your room during a moment of confusion when she heard you crying out. She doesn't have diabetes. Actually, she does. Recently diagnosed. The medical records prove it. He held up papers. So this syringe, which you claim was meant to murder you, was actually her own medication. A mistake, not attempted murder. My heart sank. They'd planned for everything. But Patricia had warned me this might happen. Then why did she tell me she was going to use it on me? Why did she say my heart would stop and it would look natural? Fleming paused. Did she say that? Or did you, in your confused state, misinterpret a caregiver's concern? Gregory heard her. I said firmly. He testified to what she said. Gregory, who was asleep and groggy when he came into the room, who admits he was taking sleep medication himself that night. His testimony is hardly reliable. The cross-examination went on for another hour. Fleming picked apart every detail, suggested alternative explanations for everything, painted me as a confused old woman who'd turned on the family trying to help her. But I didn't break. Didn't let him twist my words or make me doubt what I knew to be true. When I finally stepped down from the witness stand, Patricia gave me a small nod. I'd done well. The trial continued for another week. More witnesses. More evidence. The financial expert proved that Nora had systematically drained my accounts. The pharmacist testified that the pills in my medication bottles didn't match what was on the labels. A handwriting expert confirmed that the power of attorney's signature wasn't mine. And through it all, Nora sat at the defense table, her face a mask of innocence, occasionally wiping away a perfectly timed tear. Gregory testified again, this time for the prosecution. He looked 10 years older than the last time I'd seen him. Broken. He admitted to knowing about the locked door, about changing my medications, about the plan to keep me confused and compliant until... Until what? Warren asked. Gregory's voice was barely a whisper. Until she died. And you agreed to this? I thought he swallowed hard. Nora said it would just be a few months. That mom's health was already failing. That we were just managing her decline, making her comfortable. I didn't know about the insulin. I swear I didn't know she was going to. Your witness, Warren said to Fleming. But there wasn't much Fleming could do with Gregory. His testimony was devastating, and his guilt was written all over his face. The closing arguments came on a Friday afternoon. Warren laid out the evidence piece by piece, building a timeline of systematic abuse that left no room for doubt. Fleming countered with emotion and misdirection, asking the jury to consider whether an overwhelmed caregiver deserved to have her life destroyed over misunderstandings and tragic circumstances. Then it was time for the jury to decide. We waited in a small room off the courthouse while they deliberated. Helen held my hand. Patricia made phone calls and reviewed notes. I just sat there, numb. 3 hours passed. Then 4. That's actually good, Patricia said. Quick verdicts usually favor the defense. If they're taking their time, they're considering everything carefully. At hour 6, we got the word. The jury had reached a verdict. We filed back into the courtroom. Nora was brought in, her hands cuffed.
She didn't look at me.
Has the jury reached a verdict? Judge Morrison asked. The foreperson stood. We have, Your Honor. On the charge of attempted murder, how do you find? My heart stopped. Guilty. The courtroom erupted. Nora's face crumpled. Her lawyer started objecting. Helen squeezed my hand so hard I thought bones might break. On the charge of elder abuse? Guilty. On the charge of financial exploitation? Guilty. 6 counts. Guilty on every single one. Judge Morrison banged her gavel, calling for order. Sentencing will be scheduled for 30 days from today. The defendant will remain in custody until that time. Nora finally turned to look at me. Her eyes were full of rage and hatred, and she mouthed 2 words. You ruined everything. I looked right back at her and thought about that yellow bedroom, about the locked door and the poisoned tea and the syringe full of insulin. I didn't ruin anything. I survived. The sentencing hearing happened on a Tuesday in October. The leaves were turning gold and crimson, and the air had that crisp feeling that makes you think of new beginnings. Judge Morrison gave Nora 25 years. With her behavior and the severity of the crimes, she'd likely serve at least 20 before being eligible for parole. Gregory got 5 years, with possibility of parole after 3. His cooperation and genuine remorse had earned him some mercy. I sat in the courtroom and felt nothing. No satisfaction. No relief. Just a hollow kind of sadness for everything that had been lost. After the sentencing, I walked out of that courthouse into autumn sunshine that felt warm on my face. Helen linked her arm through mine, and we stood there for a moment, breathing in air that tasted like freedom. It's over, she said. Yes, I agreed. It's over. But endings are also beginnings, and I had to figure out what came next. Patricia helped me sort through the financial mess Nora had created. Some of the money was recovered, though not all. The house in Charleston, my real home, the one I'd shared with Harold, was still mine. The debt Nora had taken out in my name was forgiven once the fraud was proven. I could have moved back there, could have returned to the life I'd left behind. But that life belonged to a different Margaret. One who trusted too easily. One who believed that family meant safety. Instead, I bought Helen's guest cottage, made it officially mine, painted the walls a soft blue that reminded me of the ocean, filled it with books and photos and the kind of clutter that makes a space feel lived in. Dr. Langford became a friend. Real friend, not just the doctor who saved my life. We met for coffee once a week, and he never once made me feel like a victim or a patient. Just Margaret. Just a woman who'd survived something terrible and was learning to live again. "How do you do it?" he asked one afternoon, watching the waves crash against the shore. "Move forward after something like that?" "One day at a time," I said. It was the truth, simple as it sounded. Some days are harder than others. Some nights, I still wake up thinking I'm back in that locked room. But then I remember, the door opens. I can leave whenever I want. He nodded slowly. I still think about that note. Wonder if I should have done more. "You did exactly enough," I told him firmly. "You saw something wrong and you acted. That's more than most people would do." We sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd been changed by the same nightmare. The hardest part wasn't the nightmares or the fear or even the betrayal. It was the grief. I'd lost my son, not to death, but to something worse, to his own choices. To the weakness that let him lock his mother in a room and watch her deteriorate rather than stand up to his wife. I wrote him letters in prison. Not because he deserved them, but because I needed to say things I'd never gotten to say. About disappointment and love and how those two things can exist in the same heart. He wrote back once. Short letter, full of apologies that felt hollow because words can't undo actions. But at the end, he wrote something that stuck with me. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope someday you can remember me as more than the person who hurt you." I cried when I read that. Cried for the little boy who used to bring me dandelions. Cried for the man he could have been if he'd chosen differently. But I didn't write back. Some distances are too far to cross, and some betrayals cut too deep to heal. Maybe someday. But not yet. 6 months after the trial, I started volunteering at a local senior center, teaching computer classes to other elderly folks who wanted to learn how to email their grandchildren or video chat with distant relatives. One woman, Dorothy, reminded me of myself. Quiet, uncertain, recently widowed and thinking about moving in with her daughter. "She's been so insistent," Dorothy said during a break. "Says I shouldn't be alone. That she'll take care of everything." Something cold touched my spine. "Dorothy," I said carefully, "does your daughter ask about your finances a lot? Does she want to manage your accounts?" She blinked. "Well, yes. But that's just being helpful, isn't it?" I thought about that for a long moment. About how to say what needed saying without frightening her or overstepping. "It might be," I said finally. "But do me a favor. Before you move in, have an independent lawyer review any documents she asks you to sign. Keep your own bank account that only you can access. And trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is." Dorothy studied my face. "You sound like you're speaking from experience." "I am," I admitted. "And I almost didn't survive it." We talked for an hour after that. I told her parts of my story, enough that she understood why I was warning her. She listened with growing horror, then determination. "Thank you," she said when we finished. "I think I'll stay in my own place a while longer. Get to know my daughter's intentions before I make any big decisions. If you've ever seen warning signs that someone's being taken advantage of, what did you do? Your experience might help someone else." That became my purpose, I suppose. Watching, listening, speaking up when I saw the patterns I'd been too blind to recognize in my own life. Not every family member with financial concerns is a predator. Not every caregiver with control issues is an abuser. But the warning signs are there if you know how to look. Isolation. Control of finances. Medication changes without clear medical reasons. Locked doors and monitored phone calls, and that gradual erosion of independence disguised as help. I spoke at elder advocacy events, share my story with support groups, wrote an article for the local paper about financial abuse that got picked up by national outlets. Some people called me brave. I didn't feel brave, just angry enough to make sure what happened to me didn't happen to someone else. Helen said I'd found my calling. You're like a watchdog now, protecting the flock. I'm just a woman who learned to bark, I told her. She laughed. Harold would be proud. Harold. I thought about him often, especially in the quiet evening hours when the ocean turned gold in the sunset. Would he be proud? Or would he be heartbroken that his son had become someone capable of such cruelty? Both, probably. Parents contain multitudes when it comes to their children. A year after the trial, I visited Gregory in prison. Not because he asked he hadn't, but because I needed to see him one more time. Needed to understand if any part of the son I'd loved still existed. We sat across from each other in the visiting room, a scratched plexiglass barrier between us. He looked smaller in his prison uniform. Older. Hollow. I didn't think you'd come, he said finally. Neither did I. Silence stretched between us like the years we'd never get back. I'm sorry, he said. The words sounded practiced, rehearsed. I know that doesn't change anything, but I am. Every single day. Why? I asked. Not why was he sorry, that was obvious. Why did you let it happen? Why didn't you stop her? He looked down at his hands. By the time I realized how far Nora had gone, I was already complicit. Already guilty. And I was scared of losing everything, of going to jail, of admitting what I'd become. He finally met my eyes. I told myself you weren't suffering, that you were just confused, that we were helping you. I lied to myself until I believed it. Until the night with the syringe. Until then, he agreed. His voice cracked. I can't take back what I did. Can't undo the months you spent locked in that room, thinking you were losing your mind. But I want you to know, I think about it every day. About what I did to you. Good, I thought. You should. But what I said was, I hope you find a way to live with it. I hope you become someone better than the person who locked his mother in a room. Do you forgive me? I thought about that for a long time. About forgiveness and what it means, and whether it's something you give or something you find. I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe someday, but not today. He nodded like he'd expected that answer. Like he'd hoped for something different, but knew he didn't deserve it. That was the last time I saw him. 2 years after the trial, I woke up one morning and realized I hadn't thought about Nora in 3 whole days. The nightmares had faded to occasional bad dreams. The fear had transformed into something else, not quite peace, but a kind of acceptance. I'd survived. Not just physically, but in all the ways that matter. I had friends, purpose, a home that was truly mine, with doors that opened whenever I wanted. Dr. Langford brought me a gift one afternoon, a small wooden sign he'd found at an antique shop. It read, "She believed she could, so she did." Seemed appropriate, he said, a bit sheepishly. I hung it by my front door. A reminder. A declaration. Helen threw me a party for my 74th birthday. Nothing fancy, just friends on the porch, homemade cake, and laughter that felt genuine. Dorothy came, thriving in her own apartment with careful boundaries between her and her daughter. Other people I'd met through advocacy work. Dr. Langford and his wife. Make a wish, Helen said as I leaned toward the candles. I looked around at these faces, people who'd chosen to be in my life, who asked for nothing but my company. People who saw me as Margaret, not as a victim or a burden or a bank account. What more could I wish for? But I blew out the candles anyway, because that's what you do. You keep wishing, keep hoping, keep believing that tomorrow might be better than today. That night, alone in my cottage, I pulled out the note one more time. The paper was worn now, creased from being folded and unfolded so many times. Run for your safety. For words that changed everything. I thought about framing it, keeping it as a reminder. But that felt wrong somehow. Like keeping a scar instead of healing. So I did something else. I took that note to the beach and I burned it. Watched the paper curl and blacken. Watched those 4 words disappear into ash and smoke. I didn't need it anymore. The warning had been heard. The running was done. Now, I was just living. And maybe that's what justice really looks like. Not just punishment for the guilty, but freedom for the survivors. The chance to rebuild. To trust again carefully. To find joy in small things like coffee with friends and sunsets over the ocean and doors that open from the inside. Sometimes I think about other Margarets out there. Other elderly people trapped in situations they don't recognize as dangerous until it's almost too late. And I hope that somewhere, somehow, they have their own Dr. Langford. Their own Helen. Their own moment of clarity that says, this isn't right, and you deserve better. Because evil doesn't always announce itself with violence and shouting. Sometimes it comes with a smile and a cup of tea. Sometimes it wears the face of family and speaks the language of care. But justice, real justice, doesn't always roar either. Sometimes it whispers through a doctor's trembling hands. Sometimes it comes from finding the courage to trust yourself when everyone tells you you're wrong. Sometimes it arrives in the form of a simple note that says what no one else will. Run. And sometimes, when you can't run anymore, it means standing still and fighting back with the only weapons you have, truth and time, and the stubborn refusal to let them win. I'm 74 now. I wake up every morning in my cottage by the sea. I make coffee the way I like it. I take walks without asking permission. I manage my own money and my own medication and my own life. The doors are never locked. And that, I think, is what freedom actually means. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the elderly people in your life, if it reminded you to trust your instincts when something feels wrong, then it served its purpose. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another story. Because these stories matter. These voices matter. And sometimes, sharing them is the first step toward making sure they never happen again. Drop a comment telling me what you thought. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. But it's real, and it's worth fighting for. Thank you for listening to Margaret's story. Thank you for being here. And thank you for believing that even in the darkest moments, there's always a way back to the light. Until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and never ignore that small voice inside that tells you something's wrong. Because sometimes, that voice is the only thing standing between you and disaster. Stay safe, stay strong, and keep watching.